Every time you've hugged a woman you were attracted to, she walked away having already decided something about you, and you had no idea the decision was even being made. That is not a dramatic statement. It is simply how the female nervous system works, and most men never learn this because no one explains it from the inside. Here is why you keep missing it. Physical touch feels deliberate to you. You are aware of it. You think about it, maybe briefly feel nervous about it, and then it happens and you move on. So you treat a hug like a greeting, something with a beginning and an end, a social nicety that means very little either way. But she does not experience it the way you do. In those few seconds of contact, her nervous system is doing something entirely different from what yours is doing. It is running a quiet assessment, one she is not consciously directing, one she could not explain to you even if she tried, and one she will carry the result of long after the moment has passed. There is something that happens in the first seconds of physical contact that a woman never forgets. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what that is, and what 4 specific things determine whether she walks away feeling something real or nothing at all. She won't remember what you said before the hug. She will remember exactly how the hug felt, even if she can't explain why. This is not a poetic observation. It is a description of how the human nervous system actually processes physical contact, and understanding this is the foundation of everything that follows. When you speak to a woman, your words pass through her conscious mind first. She evaluates them, responds to them, considers them. But when you touch her, something different happens. Physical contact bypasses that evaluative layer almost entirely and goes directly to a much older, much faster system, the part of the nervous system that assesses threat, safety, and in the right context, attraction. Researchers who study interpersonal touch have observed that the body forms an impression of a person through contact in ways that are largely inaccessible to conscious thought. The technical term for this is somatic processing, meaning the body itself is learning something independent of what the mind is analyzing. And what the body learns in those seconds, it retains. What this means for you practically is this: she is not grading you on how confident you felt during the hug. She is not consciously checking a list. Her nervous system is running its own quiet assessment, and the result of that assessment becomes a feeling she carries, a feeling she might later describe as, "there's just something about him," without being able to say what. That feeling has specific causes. Most men assume that if a hug went fine, if it wasn't awkward, if she didn't pull away immediately, then it was neutral at worst. What they do not realize is that neutral is already a missed opportunity. Her nervous system is not looking for the absence of awkwardness. It is looking for something specific to respond to. And when it finds it, she feels it before she thinks it. That is the gap between a hug that is forgotten and a hug that lingers. The first thing her nervous system checks happens before your arms even close. And it's not what you think it is. Most men think the hug starts when they open their arms. It started 30 seconds earlier, the moment she saw you moving toward her. This is the rule most explanations skip entirely, and it may be the most important one, because the approach, the 2 to 3 seconds of movement before any physical contact occurs, is already being read. Her nervous system does not wait for contact to begin its assessment. It begins the moment you begin moving. Here is what she is actually picking up on. When a man moves toward a woman with uneven energy, too fast, too eager, slightly hesitant, adjusting course mid-approach as if second-guessing himself, her nervous system registers that as a form of social anxiety. Not necessarily consciously. She is not thinking, "he seems nervous." She is simply feeling something slightly off, something slightly unsettled about the energy moving toward her. Contrast that with a man who moves at a calm, unhurried pace, not slow to the point of oddity, but steady. A man who covers the distance between them without adjusting his speed based on her reaction, without a micro-hesitation before closing the last foot of space. Her nervous system reads that as something entirely different. It reads it as a man whose internal state is regulated. A man who is not waiting for her reaction to decide how to proceed. That distinction between moving toward her from security and moving toward her from seeking is registered by her body before you've touched her at all. Now, you might be thinking, couldn't this just be about reading the moment, feeling out whether she wants the hug? And yes, of course, context always matters. A man should have some awareness of whether physical contact is welcome. But there is a difference between genuine attentiveness and hesitation born from self-doubt, and she feels that difference in the quality of your movement. There is one additional layer to this that most explanations skip. Body angle matters. A man who approaches slightly from the side, rather than squarely head-on, is communicating something subtle but real. A straight-on approach at close range can register as confrontational or slightly aggressive even when entirely well-intentioned. A slight angled approach feels more natural, less invasive, and registers as socially aware. The common mistake men make here is compensating for nerves by moving either too quickly, which reads as anxious, or too deliberately slowly, which reads as performative. Neither carries the quality that her nervous system is looking for. What it is looking for is a man whose pace communicates that he has already decided calmly to close the distance. Once you've approached correctly, her nervous system moves to the second check, and this one happens in under a second. There's a moment inside every hug. Most men rush past it. That moment is where she actually feels something. Inside every embrace, there is a point where the movement stops and the holding begins. That transition from arriving to staying is where a significant amount of the emotional information in a hug is actually transmitted, and most men never reach it, not because they pull away too quickly in an obvious sense, but because they never fully settle. A hug that never settles looks like this. He reaches, wraps, pats once or twice, and begins the release. Or he holds, but his body keeps making small adjustments. A slight shift of weight, a repositioning of his hands, a subtle restlessness that communicates that he is not fully comfortable being still in that proximity. Her body reads that restlessness. The nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to stillness and movement in physical contact, and stillness in this context communicates something very specific. It communicates that the man holding her is not anxious to be elsewhere, that he is not calculating how long is long enough, that he is simply present without needing the moment to be over. Behavioral researchers have observed that the quality of a hold eye, specifically its stillness and duration, is one of the primary factors in whether physical contact registers as comforting or uncomfortable. And what registers as comforting in the nervous system is closely correlated with what registers as safe. What registers as safe in the right context begins to register as attractive. Of course, duration without the right foundation that preceded it shifts quickly into something that feels intrusive. This is why the approach matters as much as it does. A correctly read approach earns the hold point in a way that a rushed or hesitant approach cannot. The specific window most researchers identify is somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 seconds for a meaningful hold, not a brief social contact, and not a prolonged hold that begins to feel deliberate. What matters more than the exact count is whether the man reaches the hold point at all, whether there is a moment, however brief, where everything stops and he is simply there. Most men don't reach it. They approach the hold point and then begin leaving before they fully arrived. That is the most common error in this entire sequence. Not overstaying, but never arriving in the first place. The third rule has almost nothing to do with your arms, and it's the one most men never think about. She doesn't hear your heartbeat consciously, but her nervous system does, and it's listening for something specific. This is the layer of a hug that goes almost entirely unexamined. And it is, in many ways, the deepest one. Because while you are thinking about your arms, your approach, your timing, her body is reading something more internal than any of that. It is reading your physiological state. When a man hugs a woman with physical tension held in his chest, shoulders slightly raised, breath held or shallowed, muscles contracted in a low-level brace, her body registers that tension as a transmission. It is not something she consciously analyzes, but the quality of a tense chest pressed against her body communicates a nervous system that is activated, unsettled, performing. And a performing nervous system, however well-intentioned, does not feel like safety. This is what somatic researchers refer to as co-regulation, the process by which two nervous systems in close proximity begin to influence one another. When one nervous system is calm and regulated, the other tends to move toward regulation as well. When one nervous system is anxious or held, the other picks that up and responds to it, usually with a subtle withdrawal of ease. What this means practically is that the most attractive quality a man can carry into a hug is not a specific technique. It is a regulated internal state. Slow, full breath in the chest. Muscles that are present but not braced. A body that communicates through its simple physical quality that it is not straining to manage this moment. Now, you might think this sounds difficult to manufacture in real time, and here is the honest answer. It is not something you manufacture. It is something you allow. The men who do this well are not doing something different in their bodies. They have simply stopped doing something that most men add, the low-level physical brace that comes from wanting the moment to go well. There is a specific error that is worth naming directly. In the half second before a hug begins, many men take a slight anticipatory breath, a small intake, a slight tensing that is essentially the body bracing for an outcome it is not certain of. She can feel that half-second preparation in your body, and what it communicates is that you were uncertain of the contact before it happened. The man whose body carries calm into the embrace is the man whose body she will remember. And then there's the fourth rule. I saved it for last because it's the one that makes everything else either work or completely fall apart. The hug ends, and in the 3 seconds after it ends, everything you just built either stays or disappears. This is the rule almost no one talks about, and it may be the single most psychologically loaded moment in the entire sequence. Because the exit from a hug, how you separate, what you do in the immediate seconds after separation, is what creates the emotional memory she carries away. Everything before it determines what she felt. The exit determines whether she keeps feeling it. Here is what happens in the female nervous system at the end of a hug. During physical contact, if the contact has been calm and present, there is a brief period of what researchers describe as bonding chemistry, a mild physiological warmth, a sense of ease. That state does not vanish the instant contact ends. It has a brief continuation, a few seconds of residue, during which the exit either preserves it or erases it. A man who ends a hug with a quick, smooth pullback, efficient, clean, moving immediately back into conversation or activity, essentially signals to that state that the moment is over. Her nervous system takes the cue and returns to baseline. The warmth closes like a door. A man who separates more slowly, not lingering in a way that feels deliberate, but simply not rushing, gives that residual state somewhere to live for a moment longer. And in that moment, if he holds eye contact, calm and unhurried, what registers is something she will struggle to articulate, but will not forget. What she feels in that moment is a man who is not in a hurry to put distance between himself and her. That is a rare thing to feel, and it lands differently than almost anything that could be said. The half-second pause after separation, that brief window before conversation resumes, is where this is most specifically located. A man who fills that window immediately with words, often as a reflex against the silence, closes the moment before it has fully registered. A man who stays in that window for just a breath, comfortable with the brief silence, comfortable with her eyes, is communicating something that very few men ever communicate without knowing it. He is communicating that the contact mattered. Without performing that, it mattered. That distinction is everything. The man who performs mattering, who makes it obvious he wants her to know the hug was significant, creates pressure. The man who simply carries the calm of that moment forward, for just 2 or 3 seconds creates something she returns to later in her mind without quite knowing why. There is a version of this men get wrong consistently, and it is worth naming directly. After a hug that felt good, many men respond with a reflexive comment. Something light, something slightly humorous, something designed to manage the emotional weight of the silence. It is a form of self-protection, a way of ensuring the moment doesn't feel too serious, too exposed. But what it actually does is it hands the emotional significance back to her unfiled. She felt something, he deflected, and the feeling has nowhere to land. Do not fill that silence. Hold the moment for just a breath, then return to the world naturally. That is what she remembers. Everything I have walked you through in this video connects to a single underlying truth. A hug is not a gesture. It is a physiological conversation that her nervous system is having with yours, one that she cannot fully control, cannot fully interpret, but will absolutely remember the result of. The approach tells her whether you move through the world from security or from seeking. The hold point tells her whether you are present or performing. The quality of your breath in your chest tells her what your internal state actually is, beneath whatever confidence might appear on the surface. And the exit tells her whether the moment meant something, not because you said so, but because your body showed it by staying unhurried. These 4 things together create a specific feeling. A feeling she might describe later as chemistry, as ease, as something she cannot quite name. But it is not magic. It is the quiet result of a man whose body communicates safety, presence, and calm intention. You do not need to rehearse these things until they become mechanical. You do not need to count seconds or monitor your breathing in real time. What I want you to take from this is a simple reorientation. The understanding that what she experiences in those few seconds of contact has almost nothing to do with what you were thinking and everything to do with what your body was communicating beneath your thoughts. Once you understand that, these 4 rules become less like techniques and more like a natural way of being present with someone. Which of these 4 rules surprised you the most? And honestly, which one do you think you've been getting wrong? Tell me below. If this kind of insight is useful to you, the next video on this channel goes even deeper into the specific patterns women display when they are genuinely interested, not the obvious ones, but the ones that operate quietly and consistently underneath the surface. In the next video, I'm going to show you the moment that comes before the hug. A specific thing that happens in conversation that already decides how she'll feel when you touch her. Most men walk right past it every single time.